Okay, good morning, colleagues. Good morning, everyone. This is Mr. Mtanyana from the Library and Information Services Department. I'm working there as an e-access manager. So this morning, I want to welcome everyone who has managed to join this session. I know that we have got staff members from all departments at WSU. So I just want to welcome you all because my senior director is not present today. Hence, I just decided to, in the interest of time, let me just make that short welcoming message and a brief background about today's session, and then hand over to our guest presenter. So I would ask everyone to mute themselves so that we can prevent the background noise. We are recording the session, so meaning that the recording will be available after the session. So you will indicate if you have got a question or a comment, you will indicate by raising your hand or typing on the chat. So you are all welcome, colleagues. So today we are in this training. Recently, we have been working on an integration project with ICT and LTWT. So the main goal was to integrate our LMS with our Turnitin. As we all know that we have been using the Turnitin tool as a standalone tool. So meaning that the way we were doing things is that we would register you as a lecturer or as an instructor on Turnitin, and then you would have to go to turnitin.com in order for you to access Turnitin. So which eventually that was making things to be difficult, because now it means now students were required to log in multiple systems. So with this integration now, it means students will only log in and the lecturers will only log in on one system, which is the learning management system of WSU, and then they will be able to access Turnitin within the learning management system. Then after that, we saw a need to train the lecturers, and we will also be training the students so that we are on the same board, colleagues. So that is why we are here today. We want to train you on how to use Turnitin within the learning management system, which is Moodle. So the objectives of this training are there on the screen. After this training, the participants will be responsive in preventing plagiarism when writing. So by the end of the session, they will be able to show awareness of integrity in academic writing. You will be able to promote originality in academic writing. At the same time, you will be able to create assignments, Turnitin assignments within Moodle. You will be able to upload documents and then interpret the Similarity Index report and be able to download that report. So with this, this is what we have achieved so far, but there's a lot that we still need to do, which I want to share on my next screen. What's next? So we need to develop some procedure manuals so that the staff and the students can easily be able to navigate through the system. Another thing which I think is very important is the review of the plagiarism policy, because in that policy, it states that every 3 years it must be reviewed. So I think there is a need for it to be reviewed, because some of the discussions that we'll be having today, I think you will see that there is a need for us to review that policy. Maybe we can also develop some plagiarism standards documents for WSU Those are all the things that I think we will discuss as we're moving forward with this project. Colleagues, in our midst, we have got a guest. Let me just introduce her and hand over to her. We have got a guest. Her name is Shenali Govenda. She's a lecturer at she's a lecturer in the academic staff development at SILT at UCT. Shenali, as I've said, is a lecturer at SILT. Although her teaching experience began in secondary education, a return to higher education to pursue her studies prompted a shift to an interest in the higher education landscape. So she has worked in varying capacities in 3 South African institutions of higher education and has strong interest in the scholarship of learning and teaching. So her particular brief in the development team is to support part-time and non-permanent teaching staff. So she currently teaches on the postgraduate diploma in educational technology at UCT. She's convening the online learning design module. So she has designed several online staff development short courses and teaches on core concepts in learning and teaching and an online introduction to assessments. So while continuing to work in the field of staff development at UCT, she is working towards a PhD, exploring the experiences of non-permanent staff who teach in higher education. So colleagues, that is none other than Shenali Govenda. So Shenali, I will ask you to unmute yourself and then I will stop sharing my screen so that you can start sharing your screen. Otherwise, you are welcome at WSU.
Thank you very, very much, Lungile. I am very excited to be here today. And I'm looking at the 2 photos of me and thinking, gosh, my hair's grown long over lockdown. So I want to say thank you so much for the invitation. I am very excited to be able to join with all of you today and to have a conversation about Turnitin as a tool for supporting originality in student writing. Thank you, Tando. Can I ask you folks, please feel absolutely free to do 2 things with me. I'm going to start sharing my screen in a moment, but please remember you can always pop a question into the chat and either Lungile or I will deal with it there. Or please feel free to put up your hand and we might be able to take some questions during the session as well. Lungile, am I right in saying that I have about 15-20 minutes for this first part?
Yes, Shenali, you are right. You have got
15
minutes for the first part, discussions, and then we move on to the second part.
Fantastic. If I get a little distracted and you need to move me on, please feel free to do that. Okay, so colleagues, we're here today to talk a little bit about a tool called Turnitin, which Lungile tells me has been used extensively at Walter Sisulu already. And what we are going to be doing today is we're going to be thinking about how to use that tool really to support originality in student writing, to support good quality student writing. I'm going to start with some general comments, a little bit about some of the debates around plagiarism in the various literatures, and particularly some of the debates around plagiarism in the South African literature, which respond, I think, specifically to the fact that most of our learners are studying in a higher education context in a second or even third language sometimes. So for many of our learners, there's a second or third language context. For many of our learners, there is a move into a new discipline. And so one of the things that we will need to be aware of is that we many of our learners learn and study under conditions that are very different from those that are typical in the developed, or let's call it global north. I prefer that term, global north literature. So we should just be aware of those things as we go into today's conversation, as I'm sure everyone in this room already is and experiences in different ways. So I thought I would start with a piece of research that surfaced in 2019 that was the work of Amanda Mapelele and Sue McKenna from Rhodes University. Amanda is based at the University of Joburg and Sue is at Rhodes. And they were looking at, this piece of writing is a slightly informal piece that they did for a website. And they were looking at how we think about software and how that impacts on how we deal with plagiarism. So their argument is that students should be taught how to write academically. And that sounds like such a simple thing to say. So students should be taught how to write academically and how to avoid plagiarism. Instead, they are encouraged to write in ways that fool the software. This encourages an instrumentalist understanding of what constitutes academic writing. It portrays the academic writing process as a technical endeavor. You must avoid the sin of plagiarism rather than what it is, a complex practice of knowledge production that draws on prior research. So many of us in our institutions, we are approached by big companies such as Turnitin and various other companies across the globe, which I'm not going to name right now. And they say to us, we can help you to identify when your students are plagiarizing. And the first thing that I want to say in relation to today's session is that I believe that what we can do with that software is that we can indicate when there is a match between two pieces of text. We cannot say that is plagiarism. So in today's session, I am going to slightly unpack this idea of plagiarism, and we're going to look a little bit at how we almost overuse that term. Okay, so the argument that these writers make is that they are suggesting that what we need to do is that we need to look at how do we teach this complex practice of sharing information, creating knowledge, drawing on existing research, and that is different. Apologies, I'm just going to mute people as we go along. And that is different from simply fooling the software. Please feel free. These are some of the ideas that I'm suggesting are not necessarily common in universities. Universities have two perspectives around plagiarism. One is the kind of legalistic approach to plagiarism. So it's an approach that is about catching people who plagiarize. It is about punishing people who plagiarize. It's a very legal kind of perspective on what we should do about plagiarism. And what I'm offering today as an alternative or as a complement to that perspective, something perhaps to even challenge it a little bit, is a position that says that plagiarism is very difficult to actually detect, number one, unless you're sitting there watching over a student's shoulder. One, it's difficult to detect. And two, a lot of the things that we call plagiarism are not, in fact, plagiarism at all. So Turnitin offers us this quite useful, they call it their kind of spectrum of plagiarism. And over on the left-hand side here, they have this idea of a kind of original piece of work. So when someone submits an assignment that is their own work, composed of original ideas built on attributed sources. And that's the kind of position, that's the kind of work that we would hope that all of our students would offer us. Way on the other side, okay, the kind of opposite binary is situations where students might get somebody else to write for them and represent that as their own work. So it might be, in this instance, they talk about contract cheating. The far more common instance for all of us is when a student gets hold of a test or a tutorial or an activity from a peer and simply copies that. And it might be someone in their current year, it might be someone in a previous year, and so on. And so that's kind of, in my mind, that's the obvious case of plagiarism. That is the deliberate passing off of somebody else's work as your own. In the Turnitin world, they have all these other kinds of activities that oftentimes they talk about as plagiarism. And I'm going to suggest that we can trouble some of these framings of plagiarism. They also frame as problematic the idea that students collaborate with each other. They call it collusion, because they imagine a world where we learn in isolation from each other, where at some point we might be devoid of the company of others in a learning process. We might not have access to resources from other people and so on. And so they are quite individualistic in how they understand learning. And in some disciplines that becomes necessary at certain points, but in other disciplines, you will always have the company, if nothing else, of the internet. And so thinking about access to information in different ways is quite important for what we're doing today. Okay, so I'm going to sit back for a second and think about what constitutes accessible academic writing. And I came up with these particular criteria. There will be a whole lot of additional criteria in relation to issues such as the quality of a person's argument. There will be, what kind of content they draw on. But in general, if I were to think about any academic writing, all the way from an essay in perhaps English in somewhere like a literature course, all the way through to a thesis in engineering or a report in the health sciences. All of those for me would share these criteria. So generally, when we look for good academic writing, we look for the following things. The writing must have a position or an argument, i.e., the writer must have contributed in some way to this piece of writing that states an original position, an original argument, a particular relationship to the bodies of knowledge that they have access to. Secondly, it should draw on multiple sources. For many of us, when a piece of writing draws on a single source, it's problematic. It suggests that the student has a very limited access to the body of knowledge in a field. For most people, we would like our students to paraphrase accurately and appropriately. So students should be able to take ideas from a text, work with those ideas themselves, engage with those ideas themselves, and then share those ideas in their own language, in their own words. Okay, so paraphrase accurately and appropriately, and they should be able to quote when necessary and correctly. Okay, so for me, those are generic writing issues. And then on top of that, in the academic space, we add this layer of good writing should cite its sources appropriately. So if I read somebody's text, I should be able to see not only that they have drawn on multiple sources, that they've paraphrased or quoted correctly, but also what those sources specifically are. And for me, very often, when we think about plagiarism, we should be focusing on this issue of citation, but we tend to end up drawing in some of these issues around, is there an argument? Are there multiple sources? What's the relationship between paraphrasing and quotation? And I think we could sometimes benefit from narrowing our plagiarism gaze to look at this issue of citation and framing these other issues very much as developmental writing issues. I'm going to pause there for a second because some of the ideas I've been putting forward are actually quite, might be quite provocative for people. And so I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, to take a moment, think on what I've shared so far. I'm just skipping some slides that I'll share back with you as resources in a moment. And to say, are there any questions about any of the things that I have suggested thus far? So I'm saying that what we might do in our practice as people who support student writing is that we might distinguish between plagiarism, i.e. not correctly citing one's work, and writing issues. Somebody who just perhaps doesn't know how to paraphrase properly. Bulelwa, I see a hand.
Thank you very much, ma'am. My question is, what happens when a student is not familiar with a particular piece of writing and the student end up having a similar thought, thinking that it is his own thought and does not cite, but the lecturer picks up that somebody else had the same idea at some point?
That's an excellent question. And I would not call that plagiarism unless I had actually in my course introduced my student to that piece of writing. And Bulelwa, I would invite you to respond to what I'm about to say. If I think as an academic, how often I sit down and I write something and go, oh, that's a brilliant idea. And then I read a little further and I discover that somebody else has also had this idea. I think that that's very common in a world where information moves so fast. And I think that calling it plagiarism is an unfair, it imputes intent to deceive. It suggests that a person was setting out to deceive us, as opposed to simply being unaware of some content in the world. Bulelwa, how does that sit with you?
I think I agree with you. I am I'm problematizing this question of plagiarism, as you have indicated earlier, because sometimes we underestimate our students' ability to think, and they can think beyond our understanding or what they have been exposed to, and we will tend to think that they have plagiarized.
Absolutely. And I think that that's a very valuable way to think about these things. I see a couple of colleagues with mics on. I wonder if those are folks who want to speak. Onke, Nontembeko, are those mics on because you would like to jump in? Maybe not. Okay, so let's move on a little bit. So the first thing that we've started with today is we've started with saying that plagiarism is often weirdly treated in our institutions. There's an implication that just because a student text matches a text somewhere in the world, that there is some element of deliberate cheating involved. And I wanted to start by today saying that's very much not the case. So Lungile tells me that in your context, colleagues of Walter Sisulu have been using Turnitin for a very long time already. And that's fantastic. It is a text matching software. So it matches student text with text elsewhere in the world. And it talks about, it claims to strengthen originality. But I think that a lot of that work remains in the discretion of the educator involved. What it does is that it compares student texts to a database of texts that it has access to. Tando.
Hi, Shanali.
Hi.
How are you? It's been a while.
I'm good. How are you? It has been a while. I'm so excited to see you here today.
Okay, what I want to ask Shanali is, in a case where I'm writing let's say I'm writing about a background of something at WSU.
Yes.
And that background is the same, like it doesn't change. Let's say the issue of when WSU adopted e-learning or started to use e-learning.
Right.
Like that is something that we cannot change. So
Yes.
if someone else have already written that WSU adopted e-learning back in 2009 as a pilot to da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
So how else can I put that? Like, because it's a fact that I cannot change.
So I think that one of the things that's quite important is this issue around paraphrasing. And I think that there are two ways that you get around the plagiarism issue. One is that you seek simply in the language a different way of phrasing something, but also you're phrasing it in relation to a topic.
Okay.
So very often the originality in our work doesn't come from the fact. It's not that WSU started e-learning in 2009. It's what you're going to do with that fact. That's where the originality lies. So you may be using that as a random piece of, as just a kind of piece of background information to build up to a conversation about data access. You may be using it as a piece of information to build up to a conversation about digital literacy in students or staff. And all of those things are okay. And I think part of the problem with a tool like Turnitin is that it kind of makes things quite atomistic. It breaks things down. And so instead of looking at the big picture and saying, overall, is the student plagiarizing, we're tempted to look at these little phrases and make decisions on the basis of that. But overall, sorry, colleague, I'm just going to mute you for a second. Overall, it's not about the phrase. Like, there are only so many ways to say certain things in the world. We are going to say things in ways that overlap. Those don't always indicate plagiarism. They don't always indicate poor writing. Sometimes they indicate the fact that a person is actually absorbing a particular kind of writing in a way that is desirable and what we want them to do. Tanda, does that make sense? Do you want to say something back?
Yes, it makes sense.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so colleagues, I'm going to slip quickly out of this mode, and I'm going to just show you. I imagine that many, many people in this group have seen a Turnitin reports, and Lungile is going to show us how to add them. So I'm not going to get into detail now about this because he's going to show us that. But as a result of these Turnitin reports, what you will have is you will have a piece of text with little flags wherever Turnitin thinks that it can match something to the world. It's quite funny. This piece doesn't have a lot of matching, but it has these little flags with these little matches. And then over here, it tells you, you can either click here where it'll tell you a little bit more. You click on the one, I think, it'll tell you where it comes from, or you can click over here and it will do the same thing. Okay, so this just grabs, so this is a piece of text I added in, and what it does is it simply matches that piece of text to other texts that it has access to in the world. Okay, Lungile, is that a good place for us to pause and look at the adding of Turnitin to sites? And then we can come back to these different cases towards the end. What do you think?
Shanali, I think let's just start with these cases.
Would you like to see the cases? Okay, I can do that.
So that when you are done, I go straight to Moodle.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so colleagues, one of the things that I'm suggesting is that there are some different cases that we need to worry about. Over here, up in the top left-hand corner, there's our malicious plagiarism case. This is somebody who has deliberately copied or contract cheated, gotten someone else to write for them. This is somebody who we can respond to with some kind of punitive intervention. They get a 0 for the task. Perhaps they have to speak to a disciplinary hearing of some kind. That's an acceptable response for somebody who simply takes somebody else's text and copies it over. Okay, so That's one case. The other case that sometimes is problematic is what we refer to as a false negative. So sometimes, apologies, sometimes what happens with student texts is that students will invest some time in cheating Turnitin. So they will add little bits of text in white. They will add certain kinds of diacritic marking to the text, which fools Turnitin entirely. So actually, their text is quite high on the similarity index, the matching index, but because of various bits of technical magic, they come out with a very low index. And this person, as the red indicates, is somebody who is also substantially a problem and should face a punitive intervention if it has been determined on examining their text that they have added something that fools the software. Sometimes we have a student who comes up with a very high similarity index and it's just a technical error. Perhaps they have submitted that text to a different site in order to get some feedback, and they have a problem with that. And then you can exclude that very easily. That's a decision as an educator that you can make. I'm going to jump to number 5 because that's an easy one to explain. Number 5 is our case of a student who we have no problems with. Either their similarity index is where we expect it on the scale, either quite high or quite low, depending on the kind of assignment we've set. So their similarity index is where we expect, and perhaps the student would benefit from a little bit of developmental instruction. So they might benefit from writing some drafts. They might benefit from a visit to the writing center. They might benefit from chatting to a peer about what their text looks like. But the student is okay within the system. There are these 2 other categories of student, though, who are slightly problematic. This is our student who simply cuts and pastes pieces of text together. They're not quite comfortable paraphrasing themselves yet. They're not really sure how to perhaps quote correctly. And so this person lands up with a very high similarity index. It's not to say that they don't have original work in there. They may very well have some original constructions, original ways of pulling things together, but they need developmental writing support in order to understand how to paraphrase, how to quote, when to cite. And that student is somebody who we can support very easily, requires developmental intervention. And then over here on this side, we've got our student who, this is a problem case student in the sense that perhaps the student is not copying and pasting. Perhaps the student is reading and typing. So they're making lots of errors. They're masking their writing difficulties because they're making errors in their text. And so Turnitin doesn't pick up the problem, but they are very much copying and pasting, just old school copying and pasting, in that they are looking at text and writing it out or copying it out, typing it out. And so the software doesn't pick them up as a problem, but they are struggling with academic literacy. They're struggling with the same things actually that this case 3 struggles with: how to paraphrase, how to quote correctly, how to construct an argument. And each of these different characters, each of these different cases requires a different intervention. Somebody who contract cheats or who copies and borrows a peer's work and passes it off as their own, that's malicious plagiarism. That requires some kind of punitive or at least very firm response. On the other side over here, we've got students who require more developmental interventions, people who would benefit from the support of writing activities, drafts, writing center activities, talk around text, and so on. Okay, Lungile, is that a good place for me to pause?
Yes, Shanali.
And then you can go into Moodle.
Yes,
and if anyone has any questions, they can ask them in the text and I'll respond there.
Yeah, but I need to comment on the current screen.
Sure, go for it, sir.
Okay. In the middle, where you have the false negative, yes, and the technical error. So yes, I want to say to the colleagues that we have got Upume Zampambani, who normally deals with that kind of stuff. So let's say the lecturer has mistakenly submitted is mistakenly submitted on Turnitin, yet they still continue with that study. So she's the one who normally assists with those kind of errors to make sure that she deletes on the admin side. So whatever submission that has been made by the lecturer, but I know that she always needs that paper ID. So you must make sure that you don't delete from your side. If you are experiencing that kind of an error, you need to report it so that she can do it on the admin side. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Lungile. I think that's very, very useful
Yes.
information for colleagues. I see there is one hand up. Are we in a position to take that? Yes, there we go. And
good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
You know, when it comes to this thing of Turnitin,
yes.
What is acceptable similarity index?
Thank you for asking that question. It's a very good question. I'm going to say that the acceptable similarity index is as a number is going to shift depending on a number of factors. So if you set an assessment that is for a student to summarize something, and you've got a whole lot of students summarizing this thing, they've been doing this assessment, the same type of assessment for the last 2 or 3 years, you're going to find that your similarity index numbers actually get quite high because they're just summarizing a single text. And so it's very likely that your students will say things in similar kinds of ways. Okay, so that's the first thing. If you set assignments that are quite narrow in their scope, that ask students to summarize or to report, to engage with a particular reading, you'll have high similarity indexes. Similarity index is also determined by discipline. So certain disciplines have what I refer to as a very narrow band of discourse, i.e. there are limited correct ways to say things in that discipline. So if you think about law as a discipline, the discourse is very tight. You have to say certain things in certain ways, or actually it means something totally different. And so in those disciplines, you often get quite high similarity indexes. Similarity indexes get lower, they drop if you do the following things. If your assessments ask students to draw on a range of sources and ask students to apply those ideas to a local context, then the similarity index immediately becomes lower. If your discipline has a more open language, a more open discourse. So if you think about spaces in the humanities versus spaces in law, so like English literature versus law, or film and media versus law. Economics can be quite a tight linguistic discipline as well. So that similarity index is, it's the crudest hammer in the world. Okay, it's a big fat mallet. And it's an indication to you to exercise your expertise and look at the text in more detail. Does that answer your question, sir? Unsatisfactorily, I'm sure.
Yeah, yes and no.
Yes and no.
I'm looking for sort of a percentage.
And yeah.
Specific in this. I was submitting a research proposal.
Yeah.
And then the similarity index was about 44. And then I was told to reduce it.
What is your discipline?
My discipline is business. It's business science.
Okay.
Yeah. Business science.
So sometimes, and this is one of those scenarios where sometimes institutions don't always understand what a tool does. And so that means that my colleagues who work in, for example, the libraries, who work in your Center for Learning and so on, those in the Writing Center, those colleagues have to work very hard with the institution to help people to understand that sometimes a 44 is okay. But what I would suggest that you do
Let me just finish this.
Sure.
From 44, well, I worked it down. And then until I came to 35.
Yeah.
At that time, they were saying the 115. But I said, well, I don't know what to correct now. Where should I go? It's sort of a very delaying thing, because whatever has been said before it will be said. The person who existed 50 years ago, I can think on the same lines that that person is thinking, without even going to what he was saying. That is my very biggest problem.
I hear you. And I think that that's, when it comes to specific cases, what we'll have to do is those will have to be taken up within the institution. Colleagues, we are under a little bit of time pressure, so we're going to move on. Lungile, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to encourage people to please pop their questions. I see 2 more questions up. I'm going to say, please pop your questions into the text chat, and I will respond to them there. And I want to hand back to our host. Lungile, can I hand back to you?
Thank you, Shanali. Yes, colleagues, please let's type the questions on the chat. So I'm gonna start sharing my screen now. I want us to go straight to Moodle. Those of you who can be able to log in on Moodle, let's log in. But for those of you who can't log in, it's fine. This is just the first training. We're still gonna have some more trainings on how to set up Turnitin assignments within Moodle. So this is one of the courses. This is one of the library courses that I will be using today. So what you simply do is that you log into your Moodle account, and then on the navigation menu, you will have all your courses. For example, here I'm having about 5 courses. So in order for you to be able to create this assignment, you need to be an instructor of that course. So if you don't have the instructor rights, then it means you won't be able to create any assignments within that course. So I'm gonna select the Butterworth library course, and then on the top right corner of your screen, you must make sure that you turn on the editing so that you will be able to have access to what I'm having on my screen. So on my screen, I have already created the LIS training resources, and then I have created the assignments folder. So I'm gonna create my assignment here on the assignments folder. So what you need to do is that on the here on this assignments block, on the bottom right corner of your screen, that's where you add an activity or a resource. So if I click there to add an activity or a resource, then there is a menu that is going to pop up. So I need to select from that menu what kind of a resource or what kind of a resource I want to add. So now that I have clicked there, this is the pop-up menu I'm talking about. You can see that the first option there is assignment. So that is your normal assignment without the Turnitin report, or without the Turnitin tool integrated in that kind of assignment. So this is just your normal assignment. So in order for you to create the Turnitin assignment, you need to scroll down. You need to scroll down until you see Turnitin assignment 2. So you select this resource, Turnitin assignment 2, and then once you click, you will see on the top right that there is some kind of information that appears. So it clearly shows you that when you are selecting this tool, you are creating a Turnitin Moodle direct assignment, which links an activity in Moodle to an assignment or assignments on Turnitin. So you select this resource and then you click on add. Okay, and then once you click on add, you now have to add the assignment information. It's almost the same, colleagues. It's almost the same. If you have created a Blackboard or a Turnitin assignment, you follow the same steps. So step number 1, you give your assignment a name. So I'm gonna say assignment, maybe I'm gonna say assignment 2. This is my assignment 2. And then under summary, that's where you have to type your description or the summary of this assignment. And maybe also some instructions there. So you can have a description of the assignment. What is this assignment all about? Yeah. So you can see that the Turnitin assignment name, there's a red exclamation mark that requires an indicates a required field. So which means you cannot leave this blank, but the summary you can leave it blank. It's up to you. But I would advise that at least an assignment must have a description. And then below that, there's a submission type, which is also a required field. So you must make sure that you choose the submission type. So by clicking on that drop-down arrow, a menu will appear. So you can choose to have any submission type, or you can have the file upload or the text submission. So the text submission is where the students are going to type their text here on the text editor. But the file upload is when the students are going to type the assignment, and then they upload it as a Word or as a PDF document. So I'm gonna click and select file upload, because with the normal practice, the students, they type their assignments on Word and then they upload that as a file. Okay, and then below there's a number of parts, which is currently at 1. So with the number of parts, let's say your assignment has got more than 1 part. For example, let's say you want them to have the first part maybe as let's say maybe you want them to have an introduction. You're going to have 3 parts in this kind of assignment. So you want them to have the first part where they submit the first part, and then maybe let's say the first part is a proposal, yeah, and then you have the second part, which is the actually dissertation of that assignment. So in that case, you can choose 2. But if you are going to have only 1 part, let's say you're giving them an assignment, then they will just submit that assignment, everything in 1 document. Then you leave it as 1. Then below there's a limit, a maximum file size limit. So the maximum file limit is 100 megabytes. So you can change it if you want to decrease it, but you cannot have more than that 100 megabytes. And then allow submission of any file type. Do you want them to submit any file type? If you click on yes, then they can submit any file type, meaning that they can even submit the images. Remember that if they have saved their work as an image and try to upload it on Turnitin, they won't get any similarity index there because it's an image. So Turnitin does not read an image. So if you leave it on no, then that means they can only submit, I think they can only submit the Word document. But there is a question mark where you can click so that you can see exactly. So it says here, this setting will allow any file type to be submitted. With this option set to yes, submissions will be checked for similarity where possible. Submissions will be available for download, and grade mark feedback tools will be available where possible. So by that where possible, it means now that if it's an image, then Turnitin won't be able to pick it up. Then display similarity reports to students. So do you want to display this similarity report to students? So it's currently on no, but I would advise that you must change that to yes, because you want the students to see their similarity report. When they upload their documents, they must be able to see exactly what percentage did they get, so that they can go back and edit the document so that they can increase, as they can decrease the percentage, the similarity index percentage. Then below you have got grade display, okay? Again, if you click on this drop down arrow, you can choose to display the grades as a percentage, or you can choose to display the grades as a fraction. So if your assignment was out of 40 and then the students gets 35, then that will be displayed as 35 over 40 instead of displaying the percentage. So you can choose which one do you prefer. So for now, I will just choose the grades as a fraction. So this has got nothing to do with Turnitin, but it has got something to do with the grades and how they will be displayed on the student preview. And then below that, you have got auto refresh grades or score. And then there is a drop down arrow again. So the first option there, it says yes, automatically refresh similarity scores and grades. And then the second option, no, I will refresh similarity scores and grades manually. So I don't think there's a need for you to do it manually. So meaning that if you select this automatically refresh similarity scores, then after a student has edited and submitted, then it will refresh automatically. There won't be need for you to refresh manually. And then below, there is this option, set these values as assignment defaults. So if you do that, if you set these values as assignment defaults, meaning that you will do this exercise once and for all, and then on your next assignments, they will pick up on these settings that you have already selected, okay? And then grades, I won't say anything about that. I think you have been trained on Moodle and how to set up the grades and all that. Then now, remember we were having one part for this assignment. So you need to give it a name if you want to do so. Okay, I will leave it as it is. Then the start date of this assignment. Automatically, Moodle and Turnitin will pick up the current date and current time. Hence, you can see here I'm having 12 August, 10:45. So it's gonna pick up the current date and the current time. And then the due date, that's the due date of this assignment. So I'm gonna give it a week. The 19th of August is fine. Then the post date. The post date is the date where you want marks to be available on the student preview. So if you want these marks to be available, let's say after a week, you have to change that by clicking on that drop-down arrow and select the date where you want the marks to be available on the student preview. The maximum marks of this assignment, let's say it's 50. It's 50 marks. Now you need to move on to the similarity report options, okay? You need to click on that drop-down arrow. And then this is very important for Turnitin assignments. Similarity report options allow submissions after the due date. So if you want to allow submissions after the due date, then you can change to yes. But if you don't want to allow, leave it as it is. Then the report generation speed. Again, the report generation speed. If you click on that drop-down arrow, you're having a number of options there. So the report generation speed has got these three options. The first one, reports can be generated immediately and students cannot resubmit. I don't think it's fair to choose that option where the reports can be generated immediately and students cannot resubmit. So it means now that you are giving your students one attempt, and that is not fair. Let's say their percentage was around 55 or was more than that. So if you select this option now, it means they will preview their Similarity Index report, but they cannot resubmit. Okay, let's check the second option. Generate reports immediately. Students can resubmit until the due date. And then after 3 resubmissions, reports generate after 24 hours. So this simply means now that the students can immediately generate their Turnitin reports, and they can resubmit their work until the due date. They can continue to edit their draft documents until the due date. But after 3 submissions, then they will have to wait for another 24 hours in order for them to get the Turnitin report. So the Turnitin report, most of the time when the Turnitin database is not busy, you normally submit and get it within 5 minutes within that time. But now, when they're submitting for the 3rd time, they have to wait for another 24 hours. And then the last option is that generate reports on due date. And this one, again, I don't think it's fair. If you are going to select that, it must generate the Turnitin report on the due date. How are they going to have the chance to edit their documents and to work on their documents? So I should think that now I would select the second option where the students, where the generate reports immediately and students can resubmit until the due date. Now let's move on to the next part, which is very important and critical. Store student papers. So with this option, when you're clicking on this drop-down arrow, there are 2 options. The first one is that you can store the student papers, no repository. So you can choose not to store the student papers on the Turnitin repository. And then the second option is the standard repository, where you can choose to store the student papers on the standard repository. So if the student papers are stored on the standard repository, when the students are submitting their work, then the Turnitin database will be able to check. So the similarities will be checked against the student work that has been submitted by other students. Hence, if you select this one, you'll find out that the Similarity Index report will increase or will have higher percentages as compared if you can select no repository. So with the standard repository, it's what I think we have been encountering in the past few weeks, especially with the colleagues from VETS, where they will select, where the settings will be on standard repository, and then they submit their papers on other institutions. Maybe they ask colleagues in those institutions to assist them. They submit those papers on their behalf, and then the Turnitin settings are on standard repository. So meaning that those papers now are stored on the standard repository. And then when we submit on their behalf at WSU, you find out then that we get 100% Similarity Index report, simply because your papers are already stored on this standard repository. So when we are submitting, Turnitin checks also for that standard repository, and then hence we will get the higher percentages on that. Pumeza or Batandiwe, do you want to say anything on this? You want to add, because you are the ones who mostly deal with these kinds of stuff. Pumi, can we get something from your side? Or Batandiwe? Or Chanel, do you want to add something?
No, I think you've done a fabulous job of explaining it. I think there's some really nice comments in the text chat, but I think we're dealing with it there. Thank you.
Oh, okay, it's fine.
Mr. Mtanyan,
Yes.
I don't have to say anything. You're spot on.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, thank you, sister.
Mr. MD,
Yes, Pumi.
can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
I am trying to figure out,
Yes.
Students are going to be given third chances to fix their assignments.
Yes.
And then how are we going to figure out if the last assignment they have not copied amongst themselves, if that assignment, the final report is not stored in the standard repository?
If the final is not stored, okay.
Yes,
I think. Okay. I think we need to select the standard repository when we are setting assignments for the students. But I was saying that when the lecturer, let's say I'm studying, and then I want to submit my work and check the plagiarism on my own work, then I would advise the lecturers that they must select the no repository, because they will be submitting, in that case, they will be submitting their own work, which is their research. They are still working on that research. But when they are setting up assignments for the students, I think the standard repository must be selected so that Turnitin will be able to check against the submitted papers.
Remember that whenever they submit the paper, it doesn't matter which attempt it is. If the repository is on standard repository, that paper is going to go straight to Turnitin, and the next attempt is going to be 100% Similarity Index.
Okay. Before we go to Dr. Matenda, I saw that your hand was up. Shanali, I think you explained this very well when we were having a training last week.
Do you want me to have a try at it? So,
yeah, just have a try.
Cool. So what I suggest that people do is, if you're going to, you have two options. You can also simply exclude things from the count. So there is, in the marking suite and Turnitin, there is a place to simply exclude particular documents, and that will resolve that issue of it being compared to itself. The other thing is that if students submit to the same assignment, if the resubmit is tagged, Turnitin shouldn't be picking it up, because it matches on the basis of the assignment, the student, and the course. And so it kind of, at least the way that we've experienced it, is that it overwrites it. But that may have something to do with the integration.
Yes.
Can I perhaps pick this up, colleagues, with one of our Vula help desk people? And then I think I'll take it up with Lubabalo, and maybe what we can do, Lungile, is we can have a little email conversation about this, because I think it may be an integration issue, or how we're adding things to repositories, and those may be different.
Yeah. I think, Shanalia, you have answered it well, because what it does, I've noticed that what it does is that if you're submitting on the same assignment, same student ID, it does not increase the similarity index. Instead, it overrides. That's how it works on a PMS.
Although it's on standard repository.
That's how it works, because of the integration. Yes, it overrides until that due date. Then after the due date, then it will be there on the standard repository.
Which is why that accept date. Do you guys have an accept date on yours, Lungile?
Come again, Shanali?
So is there an accept date? So on the Vula version of it, so on our assignments tool, you have a closing date for the assignment, and then yes, you'll allow submissions after the due date. So our practice at the moment at UCT is we do allow submissions after the due date. And I think that may have something to do with this issue of whether or not when things go into the standard repository. So we accept student work after the due date very often because our students just have, I mean, there's so many reasons that a student might legitimately submit something. And then if you make your accept date very late, like you make it right at the end of term, then I think that solves, maybe that's what's solving the resubmission issue effectively.
Yeah, some of these things, colleagues, we still have to look
we'll
at
have
them
to keep ironing out
and agree. Yeah, and agree. Let's give the Dr. Mati. I saw that there were friends, Dr. Mati and Dr.
Yes,
Mati.
yes.
Yeah.
I wanted to find out. I have mistakenly uploaded my document on the standard repository.
Yes.
And usually that mistake occurs, especially when a student is checking. They do, let's say, they do their, especially research students, they upload the document, but now when the lecturer now is on the other side, wants to also check the document, then they realize that you are 100%. Can that document be removed? Since it can be proven that indeed this is the same document and these are the same people who have, this is the same person who has written this document.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Mati. I know that we have been having such cases, and Pume has been very assisting in such situations. So she has been communicating with the Turnitin guys, and you must be able to provide her with all the details that she needs, and then she will be able to assist in that. Ms. Mkabile?
Thanks, Nti. I don't know, maybe you have answered my question, but let me ask it anyway. The standard repository, is it seated within the university or is it with Turnitin? That's what I wanted to find out. Who has control of the standard repository?
Okay. Pumi, do you want to respond in that? Or Batandio, or Shanali?
Turnitin, yeah.
Pumi?
Yes, it's Turnitin, really.
Okay.
Hence, the papers can be compared to other institutions as well.
Okay. So that's it, Game Caps. It's on Turnitin. Okay. And then, okay, let's select, it must be on the standard repository for this assignment. And then what do you want to check against? Then you need to select here, check against the stored student papers. If you want to check against the stored student papers, this must be on yes. So with our current settings, we always put it on yes. Check against the internet, yes. So that when the students are plagiarizing or are copying from the internet, then the Similarity Index report, that must be included on the Similarity Index report. And then check against journals, periodicals, and publications, yes. And then the next option is to exclude bibliography. Do you want to include or to exclude bibliography? Most of the time, when you select yes, you find out that the percentage will increase because all the bibliography text will be highlighted red. And there is no way that you can avoid that, because if a lecturer is saying that we must also include references, and then that must be, let's say, in Harvard style. Then it means when I'm writing that reference, there's someone who has already written that same reference in the same way that I'm writing it. So the best practice here for me is to exclude the bibliography. Because if you include the bibliography, then you are increasing the similarity index if you are doing that. And then the quoted material. The quoted material, you can choose to include or not. So in the current practice, Pumeza, do we include the quoted material? Can you say something about quoted material and exclude small matches?
This one I've always wanted to hear from the academic writing experts. What do they do in that case? Do they take quoted materials as a similarity that's in the text, or they remove and they look at other things?
Okay. Yes, colleagues, hence I was saying that there is a need to have or to develop, or maybe departments having their standard documents and a revised policy on this, because really we are not the ones who are going to speak on behalf of the faculties and departments. You are the ones who know whether you want to exclude the quoted materials or include, and why are you doing that? Okay, before I've noted the hand, but before we hand over to you, let me just explain the last part, which is the exclude small matches. So with the exclude small matches, you have got two options here. You have got words and you have got a percentage. Okay, let me start by explaining the words. So with the exclude small matches and you select words, then you can insert a number there, whether it's 3 or 4. Okay, let's say we insert 3. So now we are saying now to the system that if someone is submitting a document with the small matches of words, let's say about 3. Let's say if someone is typing on her document, Walter Sisulu University, you know that Walter Sisulu University has been typed by many people when they are doing their academic writing. So if we don't exclude the matches, so meaning that everyone who's typing Walter Sisulu University, then Turnitin will simply highlight that. But if we exclude the small matches, let's say we say 3, then in those cases, 3 or 4, once we have got those words that are following each other, let's say library information services, then that won't be interpreted as a plagiarism or as someone who has plagiarized. So in a sentence, when Turnitin is reading, it will exclude those 3 words. So if you choose the percentage, you can select the percentage, but I know that our colleagues, they normally advise that it must be words instead of percentage. Shanali, do you want to say something on that before we move on?
Nope, I think you've said it well.
Oh, okay, no, that's great then. There was a hand, colleagues, that was up. Can you unmute yourself?
Thank you, Mr. Mdanyana. Okay, good morning, everyone. Before I even speak, I need to greet you. I'm actually an academic staff member at the Legal Studies Department at WUSU. I just wanted to comment on the part where you exclude quoted material and exclusion of small matches. I always say, because when you're actually looking at similarity index and similarity reports, it's more than just looking at the actual percentage and the actual number. A lot needs to go in, because sometimes you find that you say you exclude quoted material and then students abuse that. But when you've been using Turnitin for quite some time, you actually learn to see the tricks, because when you say you exclude quoted material, students would go around quoting everything.
Okay.
And then Turnitin won't pick it up. And then when you exclude small matches, it's actually very best that you exclude words. I actually agree with you on this one, because when you say you exclude it in percentages, you'd find that students would go around stealing bits of pieces of work from other people, because let's say you say you're going to be excluding sources that are less than 3%. And then a student is going to go around taking things from other people, as long as it's small pieces, then they put it together and then Turnitin doesn't pick it up. Only to find that when you actually exclude these small matches, the student has actually plagiarized more than 50% of the work. So it's always best that whenever you look at student papers and student works submitted, it is more than the overall similarity index. You look at what makes up the similarity index, because sometimes you'd find that a student has a 27%. For instance, we take in my department, we encourage students to submit work that is less than 20%. But you find that a student has a well-written paper that has 30% similarity index. And then when you actually look at it, it's made up of technical words and technical phrases, things that the student cannot change. And then you take another student, they're on 4% similarity, but when you look at the actual work, they have cheated the system. So it's always advisable that whenever you're dealing with students and their papers, you deal so with caution, because trust me, these students know all the tricks. They know of all the ways of cheating Turnitin. Some will even go as far as submitting documents in a format that Turnitin will not even pick up. And then they will have the audacity to submit to you and say that their similarity index is on 0, only to find that when you actually convert the paper back from PDF to Word, the student has plagiarized more than 60% of their work. Thank you, Mr. Mtanyana.
Thank you so much for that. Very useful. Thank you. Noted. Miss Bingwa, Bati.
Thank you, Mr. Mtanyana. I was going to say, Usamkeli Siwe is raising a very important point. We've been doing Turnitin for the past, 7 years, but each and every training has been a dialogue, because them lecturers know what is best and what is best required in everything that happens on Turnitin. We may not have the technicalities, as Usam Gelisiwe is explaining. So this is where they come in, because whether I've also learned that students do actually trick Turnitin. So it puts them in a position whereby they have to read the report thoroughly and be able to determine if it or not. Otherwise, I wanted to say Usam Gelisiwe is raising a very important point. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bati. Colleagues, I will skip all these other options. Yeah, and then when you are done, because this was the part that I think we needed to introduce you to the similarity report options. Then when you are done, you save. You can either save and return to the course or save and display. Okay, in this case, I will save and display. So it's supposed to take me straight to my assignments so that I can be able to have a view of the assignment that I have recently created. So this is my assignment. Colleagues, on Moodle. So I have created my assignment successfully. And then when the students have started submitting, their submissions will be shown here, in this area. Okay, let me just go back to one of the courses and show you where I have submitted a document. So here I've submitted one of the documents. Okay. Yeah. So you can see that when the student is submitted, their entries will be here. So I'm getting 100% because I've submitted a paper that I've already submitted somewhere. So this is where their papers or their work will appear. So to submit a paper, let me just change the roles to a student role. I'm gonna just change a role to a student role so that I can show you how to submit your paper on Turnitin, so that at the end of the day you can get that Similarity Index report, and then you can download and you can interpret that report. I can see that time is against us, and my system is very slow on this side. Okay, under assignments, we have created an assignment here. Let me just switch the roles by clicking on that drop down arrow and select the student role. Okay, so this is assignment 2 that has been created. So this is how I will preview it as a student from my side. So I click on assignment 2. To upload my document, I simply click here on assignment 2. And then it's loading. Then I need to click here, submit paper. I need to click on that icon of submitting paper. Submission title, I'm gonna say assignment 2. And then you can drag the file. Here you can simply click the file and drag it here. Or you can choose to click in that small icon and click on upload a file. So if I click on upload a file, then I need to check where the file is, upload a file. I need to choose the location of the file by clicking choose file. Let's say I'm gonna click on documents, and then let me just look for any word document. Let's say I want this one, draft. Okay, I click on the file and once, and then I click on open. So here is the file, and then I click on upload this file. There is my file, and then I click on add submission. So that's how you add your submission on this Turnitin assignment. So it's gonna take time to load. Then this is the digital receipt that you normally get on Turnitin. That is the ID. So you have got all this information. Then you can choose to click on what? On close. So meaning that now I have submitted my file on Turnitin, and immediately there it is. It says the Similarity Index is 0%. But I'm gonna give it some time and refresh to make sure that can I have really a 0% Similarity Index. So this is how you submit a file, colleagues. Then once you have submitted a file, or once the students have submitted a file, I'm gonna go back to the BCC course, and then I'm gonna switch the role from student to an instructor. Okay, it's fine. I'm already having that role. So I'm gonna go to assignment. Let's say now the students have submitted. So I can even see as a lecturer, the Similarity Index report, I can see this assignment. So to grade this assignment, I can simply click on this small grade button. Then it's gonna take me straight to Turnitin. Or I can simply click here to view the Similarity Index. Okay, let's say we are clicking here on grade, where we want to grade. I'm gonna click there once, and it's gonna take me straight to Turnitin, where I can now grade this assignment. So this is the student assignment, and then the Similarity Index. You simply click here to view that Similarity Index report, and then you can click on 100. Then once you click on 100, you will see all the highlighted areas. You can see that here, the match overview here is 100%, and you can see that the paper was submitted where at Walter Sisulu University. So for you to start marking this assignment, there are so many options here on your right-hand side. There are so many options here. So these are all the options that you can use to mark this assignment. So if you want to download, let's start here on download. You simply click on this download icon. So if I click on this download icon, then I can download this assignment. So I can click on current view. So it's gonna show this current view, the areas that are highlighted. I can download the digital receipt, that receipt that is having all the IDs, the one that was displayed. Then I can also download the originally submitted file. So these are the options that I have on my side as an instructor, if I want to download, okay? And then in this area, when you click there, you can have these three options. You can have quick marks, you can have the feedback summary. At the same time, you can have the rubric or form. If you have created a rubric, when you are creating an assignment, you can do that as well. You can choose to mark with that created rubric. So with the feedback summary, if you click there on the feedback summary, on this document, you can choose to add a voice comment by clicking on this record button, which is limiting you to 3 minutes. So you can do that. Then if you want to comment with a text, you can simply click on under below the edit text. You can simply click here and then you can type your comments to the student. At the same time, there is these quick marks that you can also use when you are marking student assignments. So these quick marks, they work in this way. If you are marking an assignment, you can decide to create them, or you can select from the ones that are already available. So what you can do when you are marking is to highlight the assignment. And then once you have highlighted the assignment, that part, you can simply click on this icon of the quick mark. And then you can select from the quick marks available. So if I want the student maybe to explain your evidence, I would simply click here, explain your evidence. And then I can also add if there's something that I want to add. So you can see now that the quick mark is there, explain your evidence. So if I'm done now, this assignment was out of 100. And then I want to insert the marks. Let's say the students got a 75. I would type 75 in this area of 100, and then I press enter, then I'm done. To move on to the next assignment of another student, I just use these two arrows, the forward and the backward arrow, meaning that if I'm done with this student, I would click on the next submission, and then the next student assignment will appear, and then I will do the same and then move on to the next one. Colleagues, let me pause there. I think I'm done. Unless Shanali, you want to add something?
Nothing from my side beyond saying thank you again for allowing me to join you today. I'm here for a little bit longer if anyone has questions.
Okay, that's fine then. Colleagues, we will continue with these kinds of trainings, working with the LTWT team. We will continue, and we will develop the manuals and the screencasts of how to use Turnitin together with Moodle. So this one was just the first of the trainings that we are going to have as this team. I can see that there is a hand that is up, so we're gonna give that person to unmute him or herself and ask the question. And then before the end of the session, I would just ask, Mark Oaks. I can see that is one of the deputy directors that are here, just to do the closing remarks, Mark Oaks and Umama Umkabile. Okay, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Hi, Lugile.
Thank you. Okay.
Hi.
It's Lorna this side. What I wanted to know is that now it means that we no longer access Turnitin using the URL. We access it using
Okay. No, Lorna, you can still access Turnitin in their site. You can still log in there. But on the lecturers, we do not encourage that kind of practice, because students are submitting their assignments on the learning management system. Thanks. Over to you, Marcos.
Mr. Nyana, can I say something?
Okay, yes.
Can you go back to the settings, please? There is a question that I need to answer that has been a problem with us in Turnitin.
Okay. Okay, let me go back. So if there is something that you want to edit on the assignment, you simply go back and then you click on that. Where is edit? So let me go back that assignment that I have created. This is assignment 2. Okay. This is part 1. Am I on the...
I think you need to switch the roles, Mr. Mtanyani.
Yeah, because I cannot see that. Yeah.
Go back to student.
I need to switch the roles. Return to my normal role. Thank you. Yes, and then due date, assignment.
You can even create another one.
I can, okay, I can't see.
Just quickly, I just want to get to the settings.
Just quickly create another one. Yeah, okay. Let me go back to assignments. And then from there, I turn on, is my editing on?
I think so.
Why is it not? No, it's not. Turn editing on. Yeah, it's, yes.
Okay.
Then assignments. Let me just add it here. Okay.
Use the edit button next to the assignment name, Mr. Mtanyani. You don't need to create another one.
The edit, okay. Edit settings. Thank you. Okay. Okay, Pumi.
Just okay.
You want to go to the similarity report options, yeah.
No, okay. No, go down, yes. Go down. No, not up, down.
Not here.
Mr. MD, go down.
Okay.
Okay, here is the thing.
Okay.
We have been having an issue with people who submit papers in WSU, and they would get a 0% similarity index.
Yes.
And then they will take the paper to another institution. And in that institution, a person would get 35%. The problem is here in exclude quoted materials. And another one is in exclude small matches. And these settings, as institutions, we do them differently. Or with whoever is doing the settings, be it the academic that was doing the settings, that academic might say yes here, another one would say no. With us, the tradition has been when we do the settings or helping academics to do the settings here, we have been excluding quoted materials. But other institutions, they don't do that. Hence, the index goes up while when you submit your paper in that institution. And another problem would be with excluding small matches. Here with small matches, immediately you put a percentage here. The index, it goes
Who is that? Umi, are you still there?
I'm done. Okay.
Okay.
Immediately, like other universities, they would put up, I know one that puts 7 here. I know one that in that exclude small matches, they would put 7 words. Another one would put 6 words. With me, I would put 4 words there. Hence now that there is that variety when you go to other universities. I would suggest for people, if they want to submit their papers in our repository, in our Turnitin, they would ask the instructor from that university if he or she wants the quoted materials to be included or not included, and also how many small matches words to be excluded. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pumi. That's yeah, that's very useful. Shanali.
Thanks, Lungile. I just wanted to say that one of the things that's quite dangerous is, so let's say I'm thinking about, I'm sorry, I don't know Pumi, but I'm going to just call Pumi.
Yes.
Hi. So for example, let's say you brought a paper to UCT and you submitted it to my course, and we took it down the corridor and we submitted it to my colleague in stats course. As you've been saying, those rules about excluding and quoted material and small matches, those rules would be different for all of us. And so you might get 32 in mine as a similarity index, you might get 11 in theirs, you know, it could be radically different. I think what Samke was saying earlier, Samke Lesiba was saying earlier about the looking at the text, like not trusting the similarity index as being the right answer, but going back to the text and going, what has this person done with quotes? Actually, is it just a set of quote, 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 quote? That's not plagiarism. It is terrible academic writing, though. And so I think we have to be careful that we're not trying to use Turnitin to fix necessarily somebody who can't paraphrase. It can help them, but it's not going to fix them, and it's not. Yeah. So I just wanted to say, be careful about like that comparing with across universities. And if you've got somebody who's based at another university, I think the thing never to do is never to submit the same text to different institutions or submit the same text to different sites. If you do that, that's just you're just going to end up with very high similarities, like 100%. Ta, I don't know if that's helpful or confusing.
Thank you, Shanali. Yeah, we will have this kind of discussions as we moving forward. Yeah, Jacobi, if you can unmute yourself.
Thank you, SMT. Mine is to say, as I was listening to the presentations and got to understand how does Turnitin works partially, I would definitely concur with the statement from the Writing Center perspective that we can use actually the Turnitin as to improve the writing efficacy of the students, which goes back to what Shanali was saying in her presentation, that what is important is to teach students how to write academically. And for example, this would come from the academic lecturer concerned, and how does the one design her assignment task and with the instructions. Hence, as the Writing Center, we require a clear instruction of the assignment and the technical requirements and the rubrics, because these aspects assist us when we are making those interventions. As we have said, as Shanelli indicated, that some of the challenges that we are faced with in as far as plagiarism is concerned are developmental. So, as I was looking at her continuum, they may not be technical issues per se, but the issues of academic literacy with the writing. Hence, I'm saying that I also concur with the latter speaker that mentioned the issue of looking at the content more than the technical layout, but the content. What is it that a student has paraphrased or summarized? So I think we can use the Turnitin to improve the writing efficacy by focusing on what is written and how it is written more than the percentage itself. Thank you, Sanji.
Thank you, Fefe. Yeah, thank you. I really agree with you. Colleagues, in the interest of time, let me just give Omar Cox to do closing remarks, and Ms. Mkabile, then we close today's session. Otherwise, we will continue with these trainings, colleagues. Over to you, Marcox.
Thank you very much, Lungile. Firstly, I would like to thank Ushanel for her presentation, and I'm glad that this the Turnitin has been integrated into the library management system. At least today, this is my first time I've learned that we cannot rely upon Turnitin for academic writing. So Turnitin is just assisting us as an enabler. So that means that the academics now should sit down and come up with sort of a policy, because reading from what legal studies has reported upon, that they've noted that students are cheating, sometimes they are cheating, and then what they've sat down in their department to consider, because there are also some issues to consider, the issue of technical words and phrases, and this issue of cheating, because these students can turn Turnitin decision to make them at least with to give results 0% result. So that I'm glad that the academics are here, so that because they are the ones who are champions in this, because they are the ones who are going to make sure that our students upload their writing, their assignments in Turnitin, because we are training here future researchers who are going to publish on open access, whereby now we need the disciplined students who have the knowledge of working against plagiarism. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, colleagues, for attending this meeting, this training. I hope that moving forward, we'll continue with this training so that we understand the Turnitin more and more and more. So what I would like to urge, I would like to request academics to instill, to practice this usage of Turnitin for students. The library is there for assisting academics and students to be well vested with the usage of how to use Turnitin. Thank you very much, colleagues, for coming. Thanks.
Thank you, Makrux. Mr. Mkhabile, let.
I just want to thank you, Nshanali, for this wonderful session. I'm not going to repeat what Mam Cook said, but I have been highlighting a few issues that I think are very critical for us going forward. First and foremost, I think it would be very important for us to have a conversation with the HODs about Turnitin and how Turnitin can then assist in assessing issues of plagiarism, as much as that concept, as far as I'm concerned, is very troubling. But maybe it's the start of a conversation. I'm moving from a point where I don't want to assume that lecturers know how to use Turnitin. But if we start this conversation with the HODs, then we can have a buy-in within the departments so that we can have our lecturers trained on the use of Turnitin. Mine is not only about the use of Turnitin per se, but linked to the training of lecturers, I would also recommend that students be trained. And let us not assume that our students know how to use Turnitin and how Turnitin works. This will also eliminate the assumption that students may have. I have listened to colleagues during the conversation. The idea is not to catch students in the act, but the idea is to make students aware about what Turnitin is and what Turnitin does. So my third point would be to ensure that we train students on academic writing. And for me, this is the main issue. On this one, we can collaborate with the TDSs as well as the Reading and Writing Center. I'm speaking to the academics who are here. It would be us, LIS, it would be TDSs as well as the Reading and Writing Center and the LTWT. Because what is important when we talk about academic writing is to ensure that, like I said, we don't put students on the spot so that they get caught up by Turnitin, but instead we assist our students to write academically so that Turnitin just becomes a tool to ensure that they eliminate the level of plagiarism. So all in all, I just want us to create spaces where we can encourage academic departments to invest a lot of time on teaching students academic writing. Academic writing is a skill. Our students come into the university because now we are using Turnitin at a very initial stage of their undergraduate degree. And it's the only tool that WSU will be using from now going forward. So rather than focus on Turnitin, I think we need to drive these two processes where students are taught academic writing by the departments as well as in collaboration with the DLT, as well as ensuring that they are able to use Turnitin. Finally, I will propose that perhaps departmental practices and conversation may lead to ensuring that departments have got standard operating procedures where a department knows how to actually work with students on assessment so that students do not experience they do not have different experiences from different lecturers in the same department. A certain lecturer assesses an assignment in a different way, and the other one has got different settings for Turnitin set up in a different way. So we need to kind of create, hence my starting point was to have a conversation with the HODs so that there is a standard practice within the department, which students will also be aware, and this will also eliminate the confusion and the frustration in students. Otherwise, colleagues, thank you very much. This was a wonderful session. And thank you for heading our call, Mr. Md. Thank you very much.
Okay,